Well, world leaders and royalty from across the globe will bid a final farewell to Queen Elizabeth II today. The funeral takes place after an official lying in state period of 4 days in which hundreds of thousands queued to file past the casket of Britain's longest reigning monarch at London's historic Westminster Hall. Later on this morning, the coffin will be placed on a gun carriage and pulled by naval personnel to Westminster Abbey for her funeral. Among the 2,000 in the congregation will be some 500 world leaders, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, US President Joe Biden, Emperor Naruhito of Japan, and Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan. Tens of millions in Britain and abroad are expected to watch the funeral of the monarch, something which has never been televised before. Well, for more on the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, we cross now to our correspondent in London, Laura Macon-Isherwood. Laura, good to be chatting to you so bright and early in the morning. But then again, I think where you are right now, it's all systems go. I mean, it's just, I can imagine a whole system that needs to get in place for what is expected to be one of the biggest major global events that we've seen in our time.
You are so right, and that is the message that's been sent out multiple times. This will be the biggest event in terms of security, in terms of attendance that London has ever seen, and maybe even the wider continent and the world, in fact, as well. Now, behind me, you can probably see the Houses of Parliament. That is where Queen Elizabeth II's coffin is currently placed, and the final people who have queued up for hours to pay their respects to her in person will be starting to filter through those doors, with the very last person passing into Westminster Hall at 6:30 a.m. local time, so in around about an hour and a half. There were still thousands of people that had queued up at the end of the line and were told that they simply wouldn't have time to get through and have been turned away. They are saying that they will now find another way to pay their respects. And hundreds of thousands of people are expected to line the streets of the capital here just to try to catch a glimpse of that funeral procession as Queen Elizabeth II's coffin is moved from the Houses of Parliament towards Westminster Abbey for that funeral service there. Around 2,000 people are expected to attend. Dignitaries from around the world. World leaders have been showing up over the last few days in preparation for that. Many of those have been seen as well passing through Westminster Hall and paying their own tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. Joe Biden seen crossing his chest, holding his heart, bowing his head. Jacinda Ardern as well from New Zealand also seen in that hall doing that. And so plenty of people have gathered here in an attempt to say goodbye to the monarch that has been on the throne in the United Kingdom for 70 years and has seen so much change around the world over that time.
Yeah, certainly has. And I mean, you talk about, I just want to get back to those queues, because we have been seeing queues at times, people standing there for 13 to 20 hours able to just go in and pay their last respects. Is there any estimate at this point in time as to how many people may have actually walked past the Queen lying in state? Is there any understanding? I imagine there's going to be a final figure given, but when you saw those queues, one could only imagine that is a very high number of people.
Yeah, it was quite the operation, wasn't it? We saw those people standing in line and then snaking back and forth up and down the Thames and then into the gardens that surround Westminster there as well. And at the moment, the estimation would be hundreds of thousands, the exact figure not quite sure. But it has been an exceptional operation. Officials just trying their best to keep people moving. But it sounds like people that have been waiting for those lengths of time, as you say, around 13 hours in some instance, overnight in quite cold temperatures, given we've had this sort of autumnal snap here in the United Kingdom. But they still have seemed in good spirits, making friends in the queue with strangers and having those tales to tell of that solidarity, and also being able to share stories with one another as they waited to get their time with Queen Elizabeth II. But the overwhelming sense is that once people moved into that hall, there was essentially a silence that fell upon people, an atmosphere that they say they've never felt before, as people passed by, bowed their heads, some people curtsying, bowing, or even saluting if they were members of the military, because we have to remember that the Queen was not only the head of state, but also the person for which our legal systems are sworn upon, our military services pledge allegiance to. So she has paid such a fundamental part of the life of the United Kingdom and also the Commonwealth. So there is a big shift happening. But King Charles III, the new monarch, he was seen actually talking to people in the queues as well, thanking people for attending. And we heard cheers even from up here on our balcony here that overlooks Westminster. We could hear those people celebrating the fact that King Charles III had arrived to thank them. And he said that his mother, Queen Elizabeth, would have been overwhelmed with the sheer volume of people who wanted to pay tribute to her.
Yeah, no doubt, one can imagine. And then just finally, Laura, before I let you go, is the amount of world leaders that you have got gathered there. I mean, I know our President Cyril Ramaphosa is there for the funeral, along with a host of other world leaders. And again, the logistics to try and arrange so many of these world leaders that are scattered and staying around London to bring them all into there. I mean, I was watching a report basically saying that many of them will be brought in by coach, something that they're not necessarily used to, all being bussed into the area. I know the US president, however, got a bit of an exemption. He's allowed to drive in there in his own motorcade. But all other world leaders that are gathered and dignitaries are being bussed in. I mean, this must be something that I don't think London has ever experienced, or the world, in fact. I mean, we did here in South Africa with the burial of Nelson Mandela go through something very, very similar. But this is a new world after COVID. We haven't seen people gathering like this.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely. And people will be pushed into smaller spaces there just simply because of the volume of people they're expected to come to London. People have been saying for the first time ever that London may be full, and actually having those motorcades for every world leader that's attending, driving to Westminster Abbey to attend the funeral is simply not functional or possible. And so gathering world leaders into a coach to then travel there together is a way to kind of overcome that, but also minimise the disruption for both them, but also the funeral service as well. Because remember, it has to start at 11 a.m. local time on the dot. The military will be told that they have to arrive through the doors of Westminster Abbey at that exact moment. Everything has been planned to the absolute letter, and nothing will be allowed to get in the way of that.
Yeah, indeed. Laura, we'll be there every step of the way with you. Thanks so much for giving us a bit of a preview ahead of the funeral. And remember that, of course, that 11 o'clock is 12 o'clock South African time. So that is the timing that we will have. Laura will be talking to you throughout the day. So thanks again for this morning's update.